Hello, my name's Ranana. A few months ago, my parents told me to go die, right after my sister lost her job. They blamed me, threw me out of the house I helped them pay for. But what hurt more wasn't the screaming, it was the years before that. The quiet erasing, the fake documents, the debt in my name, the email my own father sent to sabotage my career. How do you survive a family that wants you gone, but never admits it out loud? Keep watching, and I'll show you how I turned the tables. It started at the dinner table. The air was thick, not with food, not even with words, but with something heavier. Thailand was slouched across from me, scrolling her phone, her lips tight with annoyance. She'd been fired that afternoon. No one said it directly, but we all knew. And in this house, knowing was more dangerous than speaking. Mom stirred her soup with unnecessary force, her bracelet clinking against the bowl like a warning bell. Dad, as always, stayed leaned back with his mug of black coffee, looking past the kitchen window like there was something important out in the darkness. Nobody looked at me. I kept my eyes on the salt shaker in front of me, replaying the email I'd read hours ago. The one I wrote, worded carefully for Tyleen's HR complaint, never acknowledged, never used. The same way my help never was. That wasn't new, but tonight felt different. Charged. Like something was waiting to snap. Mom broke first. "So, you just let it happen?" she said, but not to Tyleen. Her eyes drilled into me like I had fired my sister myself. I blinked. "I didn't even know—" "Of course you knew," Tyleen snapped. "You always know what people are saying behind my back." "I've literally been working, at home, alone." Dad finally spoke. "You think you're better than us just because you have your little computer job?" I stared at him. "I've been paying part of this mortgage since 2019. "That was a favor. You were living here rent-free," he shot back. I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed it down. I said nothing. I wasn't about to argue over basic math. That was my mistake. "You're such a leech," Tyleen muttered, shoving her chair back. "If you had any decency, you'd leave. Go stay in one of your little internet apartments." "I didn't do anything to you," I said, softly but clear. "I helped you, again." Mom stood up. "Help? You want a medal for wiping your sister's mess? That's what family does. You think you're above that?" I stayed seated. She stepped closer, arms folded. "Why can't you just disappear already?" Her voice cracked the room. Dad didn't stop her. Tyleen didn't flinch. My name wasn't even in the sentence, but it shattered me anyway. "Just go," she hissed. "Go die if you're so tired of us." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I stood up slowly and walked to my room, hands trembling, but steady enough to grab my bag. The one I always kept ready to leave with, just in case. They followed me. Or maybe they didn't. I don't really remember. I just recall the rain starting outside. That soft, miserable drizzle that soaks you without warning. I stepped out into it, holding a trash bag stuffed with clothes and nothing else. My laptop was gone. When I asked, Dad said flatly, "That's family property." My prescriptions, my documents, even my spare charger, gone or locked away. I had nothing in my hand but wet fabric and a house key that suddenly felt like a joke. By the time I reached the front gate, I heard the lock click behind me. I stood there for a second, maybe two, before walking down the street with no plan, no umbrella, and no pride. Maritza lived 20 minutes away if you cut through the church parking lot. I walked like a ghost. No cars passed, no dogs barked, just that drizzle and the sound of my sneakers on wet asphalt. When I knocked on her door, she opened it in a bathrobe and towel-dried hair. "Did something happen?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Just needed to crash. Won't be long." She nodded slowly and stepped aside. An hour later, I sat curled on her guest couch with a scratchy blanket and a bottle of water. She had gone to bed. The living room buzzed with the low hum of her fridge and the occasional creak of the heater. That's when the weight landed. Not the cold, Not the rejection, not even the violence of the words. No, what hit me hardest was the silence. The fact that not one of them tried to stop it. Not one of them said, "That's enough." I sat there for what felt like hours, dripping, staring at the ceiling, hearing Mom's words echo over and over. Go die. You don't forget a sentence like that. You don't unhear it just because your ears stop ringing. At 9:20, I stood, grabbed my bag, and walked back out into the cold. I didn't want to be there when the house woke up again. I didn't want to be anywhere that made me small. I ended up at the bus stop near the gas station on Main. I sat down, curled the bag around my feet, and stared into the foggy streetlights. Nobody was coming. No ride, no miracle, no sudden apology. Just me, the night, and a silence louder than anything I'd ever known. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just passed out from exhaustion. Emotional or physical, hard to say. All I know is, by the time my eyes opened again, a soft gray light was leaking through the blinds of Maritza's guest room. The room was clean, quiet, impersonal. Beige walls, a folded towel at the foot of the twin bed, a framed print of a cactus above the dresser. Not one thing in it belonged to me. Not even the scent. It smelled like lavender detergent and someone else's piece. I sat up, still wearing the same clothes from 2 nights ago. I hadn't showered. My bag sat on the floor like a dead limb, half-zipped, holding the same things I carried out of my parents' house, none of them useful. I didn't cry. I just noticed the silence again. Not loud this time, just thick. In the kitchen, Maritza was already up, clinking around dishes like it was any other morning. The smell of buttered toast floated in from the hallway. "Morning," she said with a brightness that felt borrowed. "Hey!" My voice scraped. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to me without meeting my eyes. "Did you sleep okay?" "Fine." We sat for a while in the kitchen, her talking about a neighbor's dog who kept barking at 3 a.m. I nodded, smiled at the right places, made it through the motions, but she never once asked what happened, and I never offered. Midway through breakfast, she cleared her throat. "So, your mom called." I looked up. "She said you left the house in a panic, that you're not doing well." I took a sip of coffee that tasted like dust. "Of course she did." "She said you might need help." I stared at her. Did she mention telling me to die, or did she leave that part out? Maritza winced. "She said you were being dramatic." That word sat between us like a dare. I didn't rise to it, I just nodded. "Okay." She hesitated, then added, "I told her you were here, just for a night or two. I hope that's okay." It wasn't a question. I rinsed my cup and thanked her. I didn't ask to stay longer. I didn't beg. But I knew what was coming. That afternoon, she said the words I'd been waiting for. "I love you, Ranana, you know that. But it's just, things are complicated right now, and I need the space." "Sure," I said. "Thanks again." She gave me a long hug at the door. The kind of hug people give when they don't want to be the villain, but don't want you around either. I left with my bag and no destination. Again. The next day, an email popped into my inbox. Subject line, Family Healing Dinner. Location, Christ Redeemer Fellowship Hall. Time, Sunday at 5 p.m. It wasn't an invitation, it was a command. A message from my mother with the line, "It would be good for everyone if you showed up and acted appropriately." I didn't reply, but something about it. It wasn't guilt exactly, maybe curiosity, maybe the need to see what the damage looked like from the outside. So I went. I wore black slacks and a navy blouse, nothing fancy, nothing that could be called dramatic. The church was decorated like someone had Googled non-denominational healing aesthetic. White candles, folding chairs, a banner that read, "Together Again." I walked in quietly. Heads turned, smiles were forced. And no one, absolutely no one, acknowledged the fact that 3 nights ago I'd been tossed out like a used napkin. Lorinda was at the front table, shaking hands like a senator. Vernon leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, wearing the same detached expression he wore the night I left. Tylene found me first. Of course she did. There you are, she said, all sugar and performance. You're so strong, sis. She wrapped her arms around me before I could react. I didn't hug her back. She pulled away, still smiling for the audience. So proud of how you're handling everything. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to stay upright in a room that had decided my absence never happened. I found a seat near the back, watched as they played a slideshow of family memories. None of them included me. People clapped. A few whispered condolences about the misunderstanding. Someone passed me a printed program. I opened it. Inside was a family photo, taken a few weeks ago. Smiling faces, coordinated outfits. I wasn't in it. I flipped the page. My name wasn't listed under beloved daughter, just Lorinda, Vernon, and Tylene. As if I'd never been part of it at all. I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I folded the paper slowly and slipped it into my purse. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to remember how thorough they were when they erased me. No screaming, no scene, just quiet deletions. Sometimes betrayal doesn't shout, it whispers in a room full of applause. After the church dinner, I walked back to the place I'd been renting, a room in a shared house near the university. It wasn't home, just a temporary solution, with a lock on the door and enough square footage to sleep without worrying who might open it next. I slipped off my shoes, hung my coat, and stood for a moment in the silence. My purse was still under my arm, heavier now with that program. The one with my face absent, my name conveniently omitted, my entire existence edited out like I'd been some unfortunate footnote in a family album. I set it down on the little desk by the window and stared at it. Then I turned to the small storage bin I'd shoved in the closet when I moved in. A box that had followed me from every place I'd lived since college, never unpacked, never touched. I didn't know why I was reaching for it now. Maybe because pretending I didn't care had stopped working. The lid creaked open, revealing a stack of old letters, cords to devices I no longer owned, and one journal. Black leather cover, scuffed edges, bent spine. My name was scratched into the corner with a paperclip when I was 15. I sat on the floor and let it fall open naturally. It landed on a page near the back, creased, with a folded corner. March 3rd. I bled on the carpet today. My breath caught. The handwriting was mine, but the words looked foreign now. I read on. Tylene screamed about the laundry. I didn't answer fast enough. She threw the remote, but it missed. Then she slapped me, twice. I didn't cry until I saw the blood on the rug. I remembered the day, vividly. Not the hit. That had faded. But the quiet that followed. How I'd been made to apologize for being overly sensitive. How Mom had sighed and said, "Just don't provoke her next time." Dad hadn't even looked up from the TV. I flipped back a few pages. There were more entries like that. None as explicit. Just implications. Bruises without sources. Tension described like weather. Moments I had convinced myself didn't matter. I had never shown this to anyone. Never needed to. I thought I had moved past it. But tonight, in the wake of being cut out like a tumor no one wanted to acknowledge, the pattern clicked into place. They hadn't just erased me from photos or programs. They'd started years ago. Quietly. Efficiently. By making me the problem, then calling my silence grace. I reached for my phone, took a photo of the journal page, and added it to a folder in my cloud drive labeled Untold. Not revenge. Just proof. I wasn't crying, not this time. I was tired, sure, but there was a clarity that sat in my chest like a brick. Heavy, yes, but solid. I thought about the times I was blamed for a broken plate, even though I'd been out of the house. The times I'd been sent to my room when the argument wasn't even mine. The phrase, "don't escalate things," being used as code for, "don't defend yourself." It wasn't keeping the peace, it was keeping me quiet. I reached for a pen and flipped to a blank page. She hit me. They saw. They said I was overreacting. I'm not pretending anymore. I closed the journal, slid it back into the box, and tucked it deep into the closet. Then I walked over to my laptop and added the scanned page to the legal folder Jolene had helped me set up. It sat next to the mortgage file, the debt notice I never signed, and the note from Tylene's former boss, thanking me for my editing help on an HR report she submitted. Each piece wasn't dramatic, but together they formed a truth that couldn't be repainted with apologies or Sunday dinners. I wasn't building a case out of spite. I was building a history they couldn't rewrite. That memory didn't hurt because it was old. It hurt because I still believed I deserved it. The following morning, I woke up with a knot in my chest that hadn't formed overnight. It had been settling there for years. I got dressed slowly, avoiding the mirror. I didn't need to see my face to know what was sitting behind my eyes. After a quick breakfast in the shared kitchen, I made my way to the library downtown. It wasn't far, just a 10-minute walk, but the air had that dry bite only Texas winters manage. The kind that doesn't feel like weather, just warning. I chose a desk near the back, away from the students and their finals week chaos. I needed quiet, focus. There was something gnawing at me, something I couldn't name yet, but my gut was telling me I'd missed something bigger. I pulled out my laptop, connected to the library's guest Wi-Fi, and started digging. At first, I was just checking on my accounts. I'd gotten into the habit ever since being pushed out of the house, half out of paranoia, half out of necessity. But as I scrolled through the familiar logins, I paused. A tiny voice in my head whispered, "What if your name's already been used somewhere else?" So I opened a public financial record database, one I remembered from an old job. I typed in my name, my last known address, and the state. 2 entries popped up. Small business loans, both delinquent, both under my social security number. I stared at the screen. One had been opened while I was still abroad, presenting at a data conference in Berlin. The second was listed as joint use, linked to an address I hadn't lived at in nearly 5 years. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, cold but steady. I downloaded the records and saved them to the same legal folder I'd been quietly building. I didn't cry, didn't panic, because deep down I already knew. Tylene, she had access. She always found a way to have access, and she was bold enough to think she could bury it under the idea that we were family. I left the library 2 hours later and walked a few blocks to a small coffee shop I liked. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of place where no one asked what you were working on. There, I opened my old Gmail account, the one I hadn't touched in years. Just curiosity at first, then habit, and then, there it was. A chain of emails between Tylene and a coworker, dated around the same time I'd helped her tweak her resume. I remembered reviewing it late one night, fixing the wording so it sounded less angry, but still strong. Her words, not mine. The email thread wasn't just work banter. It was condescending, dismissive, casual in the way people are when they think no one will ever read their words. If anyone asks, I'll say my sister helped double-check the numbers, but I made the decisions. Obviously. Further down, one line stood out. I told her it was just data cleanup, but she basically rewrote half the report. Oh well. I sat back in my chair. So that's what I was to her. An invisible assistant. The person she used when she needed polish, then discredited as soon as the ink dried. I forwarded the thread to my main inbox. Attached a note. For lawyer only. That night, I scheduled a meeting with Jolene. When I walked into her office the next morning, I didn't start with tears or a rant. I just opened my laptop, pulled up the folder, and turned it toward her. These are the files I've collected: identity misuse, potential fraud, and an ongoing pattern of reputational damage. Jolene looked through them carefully, her fingers moving steadily over the trackpad. She nodded slowly. We can work with this. No lawsuit yet, but a declaration of ownership, identity protection, and if necessary, cease and desist letters. I don't want to take them down, I said. I just don't want to keep being erased. Jolene met my eyes. That's not a small thing you're asking for. I know. We finalized the plan. Document everything. Backup copies, digital timestamps, cross-reference dates and usage. No confrontation, no shouting match in public. Just the quiet building of a case no one could refute. I left her office just before noon, stepping out into a sky that looked friendly, sunny, cloudless. But I knew better. Some days, storms don't come with thunder. They arrive as paperwork. It wasn't just my name she stole. She'd borrowed my silence for years. 2 days passed in a rhythm that didn't quite feel like mine. I went through motions, work, coffee, sleep, but everything beneath it pulsed with a different beat. A pulse made of facts I'd uncovered, pages I'd scanned, things I could no longer pretend were misunderstandings. On the third morning, Jolene called. "I've been thinking," she said. "If your name was ever on the original deed, and we can prove it was removed improperly, that's enough to establish legal leverage." I didn't answer right away. She continued, "Not a lawsuit, not yet, just pressure, strategic pressure." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Then we start there." That afternoon, I drove to the bank branch near downtown. The same one where I'd once co-signed a cashier's check, back when Tylene was unemployed and our parents were trying to avoid foreclosure. I remembered sitting beside my mother in the waiting area while she made small talk with the teller about weather and all these complicated adult things. Inside, I waited at the front desk while a young woman, barely 20, paged a supervisor. A few minutes later, an older staff member appeared, her badge reading Noreen. "I think I remember you," she said with a polite smile. "It's been a few years." I explained the situation carefully. She listened without interrupting, then nodded once and walked off to search the archives. 10 minutes later, she returned with a sealed envelope and laid it in front of me. "This was scanned and stored digitally, but this is the original record from the purchase," she said, sliding it over. "It includes both signatures, yours and your father's." I opened the envelope slowly, and there it was. My name, in blue ink, right beside Vernon's, the purchase agreement, the down payment contribution, my initials in 3 places. I didn't smile, didn't say much, just stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. I thanked her, took a photo, and left with the envelope zipped tight inside my laptop sleeve. Back at Jolene's office, we drafted a notarized statement. Declaration of financial interest and co-ownership. No dramatics, no accusations, just documentation. When we finished, I asked her for 2 printed copies, one for my records, one to deliver. By dusk, I was back at the house on Clementine Drive, the house I once helped keep afloat. I didn't knock, I didn't go inside. I simply slid the envelope through the front mail slot, along with a note I'd handwritten the night before. It said, "I won't ask again." I waited for nothing, walked back to my car, drove away. The call came later that night, around 9:30. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen on screen since the day they threw me out. Vernon. I let it ring once before answering. "You really think paperwork changes anything?" he said. His voice was clipped, like someone forcing calm through gritted teeth. I kept my tone neutral. "It means I exist, on record, legally, permanently." He snorted. "You always were a handful, you just didn't know when to stop." "I did stop," I replied. "I stopped waiting for you to see me." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. "Ungrateful little—" I ended the call before he finished. I didn't throw the phone, didn't scream. Instead, I opened my laptop, scanned the deed a second time, uploaded it to 3 separate folders, and labeled it, "Anchor copy, do not edit." Then I emailed a duplicate to Jolene with a timestamp and digital signature, just in case, because some people don't burn bridges. They quietly build new ones behind your back, hoping you never turn around. They thought I was quiet because I was weak, but I was quiet because I had receipts. 2 nights after Vernon's call, I found myself wide awake at 3:17 a.m., staring at the ceiling. It wasn't the insomnia that bothered me. It was what kept coming back. A sentence. A single thought. What else did they wipe clean? By mid-morning, I was back at the public library, tucked into a private study room I'd come to rely on. The usual noise. Printers spitting pages, whispers between students, the rolling thuds of chairs, blurred into background static. I logged into my archived Gmail account again, this time focused on the sent folder. But not just the main one. I checked the recovery logs and partial backups tied to my old devices. It took longer than I expected, scanning through hundreds of autosaved drafts, half-written messages, and old scholarship essays. And then, I found it. Dated April 2nd, 2 years ago. Subject line: Formal apology letter. Urgent. It was addressed to Tylene's HR department. Every line was careful, measured, professional. The kind of language I'd spent a decade learning how to wield. Soft enough to sound empathetic, firm enough to suggest accountability without collapse. And it was never sent. Worse, the copy had been overwritten with a new draft. One that painted her as a victim of office politics, blaming internal confusion, and vaguely alluding to a troubled sibling as the source of distraction. I froze. The recovery metadata showed the last user logged into the device that edited the file wasn't me. It was Lorinda. She had used the shared laptop, the one we all passed around like a family dog bowl, to access my account. She deleted my version, replaced it with one that erased my effort, and subtly implicated me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, hands cold despite the heater buzzing behind me. It was never about truth. It was about optics. Always had been. By the time I returned to my apartment that evening, the sky had darkened into that early winter gray that makes everything feel heavier. I tossed my coat over the chair and pulled up the local records database Jolene had mentioned. A quick search. Name: Renana Ellis. Address: 47 Clementine Drive. No matching result. I blinked, tried again, changed spelling variations. Nothing. Then I searched the registry for that address. Only 2 occupants listed, Vernon and Tylene. No mention of Lorinda, no trace of me. I called the county clerk's office to verify. After a short hold, a tired-sounding woman confirmed it. We have no active residence listing associated with your name for that property. Looks like a change was processed about 8 months ago. 8 months ago. Before the fight. Before the screaming. Before they told me to disappear. They'd erased me on paper before they ever did it out loud. That wasn't neglect. That was intention. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at the screen while my fingertips hovered over the mouse, like my body needed a moment to catch up. Eventually, I stood, grabbed a glass of water, and paced for a few minutes. The stillness in the apartment made the truth echo louder. They had cut me out without a word. And if I hadn't been documenting, if I hadn't been curious enough, stubborn enough, I never would have known. I turned to my laptop and created a new cloud folder: Legal, Reentry and Identity Restoration. Inside, I uploaded the recovery log of the deleted apology with timestamps, the registry screenshots, the call transcript from the clerk's office, all of it labeled, cross-referenced, tagged. Then I added a single-line email to Jolene. Silence is done. This wasn't revenge, it was accuracy. Because they hadn't just told the world I was unstable. They'd engineered the proof. And now, it was my turn to engineer something they didn't expect. A version of events they couldn't twist, water down, or smile through at church luncheons. They wanted me out of the house. Now, I was going to remove their version of me from the story. Jolene's number flashed across my phone before sunrise the following Tuesday. I hadn't even poured my first cup of coffee. "There's a problem," she said. I was already slipping on my shoes. 10 minutes later, we sat across from each other in her office, blinds still drawn. Her screen showed a digital copy of a property transfer application dated 5 days prior. My family home. Filed without my signature. No mention of my partial ownership. The listed seller was Vernon. The buyer? A distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. A straw buyer, Jolene said plainly. They're trying to move the asset before you can act. She typed quickly, filing an emergency injunction while explaining next steps. I watched her work, absorbing every click, every sentence. My hands stayed in my lap. They thought you wouldn't check, she added. No, they thought I'd still be scared to. By noon, the sale was frozen, temporarily. But the message was clear. They were escalating, and so was I. That afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. I wasn't far from campus and found myself tracing the path I used to take after lectures. I paused at a bench near the old student center, checked my email, and noticed a reply I hadn't expected. 3 months earlier, I'd applied for a position at a consulting firm in Dallas. I hadn't gotten so much as an interview. I had sent a follow-up last week out of curiosity, not out of hope. The response included an attached memo, redacted, but revealing enough. It read, "This applicant may be emotionally unstable. Family sources report ongoing disputes and mental health concerns. Caution advised." My stomach sank. The phrasing felt eerily familiar. The metadata on the email showed it came from an anonymous account, but the tone, the cadence, the slight condescension, it read like something Vernon would say behind closed doors. Like the things he'd mutter over dinner when no one else was around. Words that didn't come from concern, but control. I didn't need confirmation. I already knew. I downloaded the memo and dropped it into the digital file labeled Defamation Internal. That night, I booked a 2-hour slot at a podcast booth downtown, the kind rented by influencers and burned-out grad students. I wasn't going in to make a show. I was building something I could archive, submit, timestamp, something no one could delete. I closed the door behind me, put on the headset, and hit record. "This is for legal documentation," I said. My voice didn't shake. "This is for the person who's been told to be the bigger person over and over until she forgot she existed at all." I spoke plainly. I read the facts. The forged deed transfer, the debt in my name, the deleted apology email, the family registry edit, the anonymous tip that cost me a career opportunity. I didn't name names. I didn't scream. Because none of this was for them. It was for the record. I saved the file, uploaded it to Jolene's archive, marked it with the date and title, Restoration Part 1. When I left the booth, the air outside had turned bitter, a cold front sweeping through, the kind that bit at your bones without apology. But something in me had shifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running. I was documenting, preserving, refusing to vanish. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about every version of me they tried to kill without leaving a mark. I didn't rush. That morning, I folded my clothes slowly, ironed the only decent blouse I hadn't boxed up, and laid out a plain envelope on the kitchen counter. The printer hummed behind me, pushing out one final sheet. My own edition. A copy of a thank you email, dated 2 years ago, sent by someone who no longer worked at the firm that had once let my sister carry my words like they were hers. By noon, I was in the car, driving across town under a low-hanging sky. It was Lorinda's birthday. I hadn't been invited, didn't expect to be, but I didn't need an invitation to walk into a house I had helped save. They were already gathered when I pulled up. Cars lined the driveway. I parked on the curb and shut the engine off without checking the mirror. No nerves, no hesitation, just purpose. Inside, the living room buzzed with fake joy, laughter that didn't quite echo, distant aunts balancing paper plates on their knees. A store-bought cake with pink frosting sat untouched on the counter. My mother stood near the dining table, holding a glass of wine and an expression too neutral to be real. Conversations dropped as I stepped in. Some turned their heads. Some pretended not to see me. Nobody said my name. I didn't explain myself. I walked to the table, placed the sealed envelope down in the center, and said, "Your copy, it's all there." Lorinda blinked. Vernon narrowed his eyes. Tylene looked amused, like I was performing for someone. No one moved to open it. I didn't wait. I turned to leave, but paused halfway to the door. "There's also a copy of the scholarship disbursement in there. It covered $18,400. That was mine." Tylene's smile cracked just slightly. "You're talking about that student fund?" she said too lightly. "Mom said they canceled it because of budget cuts." "Funny, because the funds were paid out, directly toward your credit card debt." I heard a fork clink onto a plate somewhere behind me. I wasn't done. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the last page from the print run that morning. "I know most of you don't check your email," I said, "so I figured I'd bring this one with me." I handed it directly to Vernon. He glanced at it, scoffed, and set it on the table without a word. Tylene leaned forward, scanning it upside down. I watched her face shift, just barely, when she recognized the subject line. "Thanks to your sister, I didn't get fired." Her former boss had written it after I ghost wrote the final HR report that saved his reputation. Tylene had submitted it under her name. I never saw my contribution again. Lorinda cleared her throat. "You know, this isn't the time." "No," I said. "You made sure I never had one." Silence followed, the kind that reveals more than words ever could. "I was told to be quiet," I continued, "to keep the peace, not to embarrass anyone, so I didn't. I let you pretend. I let you rename things." I tapped the envelope once before turning back toward the door, but I kept the receipts. No one stopped me. No one called out. Outside, the air felt heavier than when I'd walked in, but my chest didn't. I got into my car, started the engine, and didn't look back. Not toward the house, not toward the people in it. I didn't drive anywhere in particular. I just drove. Past the old movie theater, past the grocery store where I used to run errands for a family that never saw me. And somewhere along that drive, it stopped mattering if they ever apologized. Because I wasn't looking for remorse anymore. I never needed them to be sorry. I just needed them to stop pretending I didn't exist. The sun had finally found its way through the haze. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was steady, an ordinary winter light that didn't ask to be noticed. 3 weeks had passed since I dropped the envelope on the birthday table. 3 weeks without a word from them. Not a call, not an email, not even a rumor. I was folding laundry one afternoon when I noticed the small padded envelope wedged between the pizza coupons and a gas bill in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in a style I hadn't seen since high school. Inside was a flash drive. I knew better than to plug it in directly. I scanned it on a separate device I kept for cases like this. The file was named sorry.mp4, an apology dressed up like a Trojan horse. I played it. Tylene appeared on the screen, sitting cross-legged in what looked like my old bedroom. My comforter, my posters, my ghost. "I guess you think you've won," she began, her tone too smooth to be sincere. "But here's the thing. You were never supposed to matter this much. You were always the backup plan, the one who filled in when everyone else failed." She tilted her head, fake concern dripping from every word. "You think you're brave now? You're just loud. You only sound strong because you stayed silent for so long. But that wasn't strength. That was compliance." Then she laughed. Soft, mocking. I didn't react. I didn't even blink. Because the moment I saw her face on that screen, I realized something important. This wasn't her taking accountability. It was her trying to reclaim the version of me she had helped destroy. I copied the file into the cloud folder. Labeled it Confession Unsolicited. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to respond. It wasn't my job to manage her perception anymore. Later that week, Jolene and I walked into the courthouse together. No drama, no cameras, just a hallway that smelled like paper and polish, and the sound of shoes echoing down tile floors. We filed 3 documents. The first, a correction of property ownership records, acknowledging my original financial contribution and restoring my legal rights to the deed. The second, an affidavit affirming identity misuse, tied to the unauthorized debts and digital tampering that had cost me opportunities I hadn't even known I'd lost. The third, a declaration of name reinstatement, removing the quiet legal erasure Vernon and Lorinda had filed behind my back. Jolene looked at me after the last one was stamped and said, "You're officially on record." I exhaled. Not relief, not victory, completion. That weekend, I moved into a small brick house at the edge of town. 1 story, no shared walls. A garden out back I wasn't sure what to do with yet. I unpacked slowly. No rush, no audience. There were no family photos on the shelves, no hand-me-down furniture, just me and my things and the life I was building deliberately. On one wall, I hung a floating shelf with 2 items, a folder labeled Untold, and a framed print that read, "Don't let them write your version." I didn't put it there to remember the pain. I put it there to remind myself who I became after it. That evening, I opened a window and let the cold air settle around me, like a truth I'd stopped trying to change. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need reconciliation. What I had now was fact and space, and they don't get to rewrite me anymore. That job belongs to me now. Before we end this story, I want to leave you with something real. If you've ever been erased, quietly, politely, systematically, you'll understand what I mean when I say silence can be a strategy, but it should never be a sentence. I didn't raise my voice to get even. I raised it to get free. I used to think love meant staying, fixing, enduring. But I've learned that sometimes love looks like drawing a line, protecting what's left of your peace, and walking away with your name intact. So here's what I'd ask you to carry forward. Don't let anyone rewrite your story just because they're louder, older, or better at pretending. Your story matters. Even the chapters they tried to skip. Especially those. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family? Did you ever have to fight quietly, just to be seen? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you. Or just tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's on the other side of this screen. And if this video moved you, even just a little, consider subscribing. Your support helps me keep sharing stories that dig deep, make us think, and remind us we're not alone. So hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay strong, stay grounded, and never forget, you own your story, not them.